Welcome, hotshots, to the Firepower X self-command portal. Here you can find the industrial strength tools you need to dominate your personal and professional wellness. My name is Jess. I'm boss lady here at Firepower X, former firefighter and host for today's webinar, and I have two very special guests that I am stoked to have a really cool conversation with, Evy Lyons and Ariel Paul from Apex Cool Labs. So Evy, I'm going to start with you. Evy is the co-founder and CEO of Apex Cool Labs, where she is on a mission to maximize human performance via the science of palm cooling. And Evy's fun backstory is that she was once a marketer with 20 years of experience, and she traded smoking a pack a day for weightlifting and hasn't looked back. So she lifts, she trains, she treats life like a game. Welcome, Evy. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Awesome. And Ariel Paul is a PhD physicist, prototyper, and inventor of the Narwhals, which I'm excited to learn more about today, an innovative palm cooling device for enhancing performance during training and competition and other uses, as we're about to learn. And prior to co-founding this most recent venture, he was also the director of development on a project out of CU Boulder that created interactive math and science simulations. So he tinkers, he rock climbs, he helps us nerd out on science. Welcome, Ariel. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
Awesome. So I like to start our viewers off with some backstory. So give us the hot and dirty on how this whole thing started.
So about 2.5 years ago, Ariel and I did not know each other at the time. And we both heard a podcast, the Huberman Lab podcast, where the guest was a researcher who had studied this concept of palm cooling for decades. And in this podcast, Dr. Craig Heller from Stanford University explained that by cooling your palms, you could get stronger faster, on the order of increasing your pull-up volume by 144% in 6 weeks. And as somebody who is an avid fitness, enthusiast, and had also been plateaued in her pull-ups for many years at 7, I was like, how do I get my hands on this technology? Unfortunately, in the podcast, they talked a lot about the results, but they didn't explain how to do it. And so without a lot of technical knowledge, I decided to try to put my hands in a bucket of cool water in my garage gym. And I tweeted a video of myself doing this out. And I said, hey, am I doing this right? Who else is trying this? Help, please. And I'm fortunate that Ariel found my tweet.
Yeah, so I had heard the same exact podcast independently. And like Evy, noticed that they discussed these incredible results, but not really how to do it. But I am the nerdy physicist, so it's published research. I downloaded the papers, read the parameters that are necessary to have effective palm cooling, and then went to work at the local hardware store getting some plumbing parts. Actually, Evy, if you want to hold up the very original.
Thank you. Wow. Does it have
So
tubes as well? Tubes on the bottom? Okay.
Yeah. The very original was basically, thing I tried was just some copper pipes soldered together with water recirculating through them at the right temperature. Tried that out and was just blown away about how well it worked. So at the time, a housemate of mine and I tried it out on bench press and basically doubled our volume on bench press trying it out. So instead of doing 5 sets where that last rep was hard to push out, we did 10 sets and was just shocked, like, this is crazy. How can this work so well? So I started looking around for, were there other people trying to DIY hack this? And I came across Evy's tweet, realized she only lived about 45 minutes away. And so said, why don't you come over, try this out? I'll build you one of your own. So.
Wow. So it sounds like it was that interesting colliding of planets at the right time, right moment. And I love it. And Evy, were you able to increase your pull-ups from using,
Yes.
yeah?
Yes, I was. And with that original, so Ariel sent me home with my own version of that original device, which I had hooked up to a Yeti in my garage that it was just filled with the right temperature water.
Mhm.
And I replicated, or I did a version of what Stanford did in their study and was able to increase my pull-up volume by 50% in 8 weeks with only one session a week. And I have since hit 15 as a top set in terms of unbroken pull-ups. And I've used it for pull-ups, a lot of body weight stuff, push-ups, but also I haven't lifted a day without palm cooling since that original moment, I guess.
Wow, that's really
Yeah.
cool.
And so after Evy took that home, was trying it out, I started to just get really curious. Could I build something portable? Because the device that I had first worked, but it wasn't very practical. You needed a recirculating pump, you needed a big bucket of water, something like that. It just wasn't really practical to bring to the gym. So I started hacking around to see, could I make something that could be truly portable? So for months, my refrigerator and freezer were filled with different materials, trying out different things. And that's, as you see behind Evy, we came up with this design, and Evy had been such a good field tester. I brought it to her and said, why don't you try these out? And when she tried these, she said, oh, you got to sell those. And I thought,
Hmm.
well, I'm a physicist, you're a marketer,
Yeah,
maybe we should sell these.
yeah. And how long do you have to hold on to them to actually start to see a difference in your performance?
Yeah, almost all the research, basically the bottom limit's about 60 seconds.
Okay.
You want to be able to hold them for about 60 seconds. The sweet spot for interset palm cooling for resistance training is 2 to 3 minutes,
Hmm.
but you'll start to see a benefit after about 60 seconds. So when they're used by basketball players or people trying to recover quickly at a TV timeout, they may only get something like 60 seconds with them, but that's about, below that, you're not getting much benefit. You're getting some, but that's kind of the threshold is 60 seconds.
Hmm. Now I know you guys have had some you were working with athletes. Is that I know you've had some big profile like athletics teams and players with the narwhals in their hands. Can you kind of share with us a little bit about, who and what you've done with them?
Yeah, absolutely. We were very surprised when we first launched our website and went out there into the world because we thought we would be maybe filling a demand from people like us, fitness enthusiasts. But very quickly, we were starting to be reached out to by elite strength and conditioning coaches. And one of the first sports where we really saw traction was with hockey players. And this will be interesting in a tie back to the fire service as well. People heavily insulated, working very hard, basically. But yeah, the in hockey in particular, they were looking for ways to thermoregulate, and they had tried palm cooling in the past, but hadn't found anything that really worked in their workflow. And so, within a couple of months, we were very proud to see the device in the hands of 4 Stanley Cup playoff teams. That was last year, and we've continued the hockey success there. But it's applicable, like Ariel said, to any sport where you have an ability to rest for 60 seconds or more.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that hockey use case, like Evy said, will just hit home. It was really first the goalies that they wanted. Large individuals wearing 40 to 50 pounds of gear, working hard, and then getting a break to help cool down, that 20-minute break that they have between periods. And we learned that that is shockingly similar to the use case for firefighters.
Yeah, so how did that connection get made? Did the fire service approach you or did you approach them?
They approached us. Evy can tell you the story.
Oh,
Mhm.
sure. So one of our early customers is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt who was using them at a tournament. And at that tournament, a tactical trainer for a large East Coast fire department saw him and said, "What is that?" And he explained it was palm cooling. And that trainer was like, "We've been looking for something like this." And so that led to uh, sort of a deeper conversation with them. And they have now deployed the Narwhals, our device, for palm cooling in both incident rehab and training.
Mhm. Oh wow, those are great both great use cases, because typically you get about 5 to 10 minutes of rehab, especially for a big working fire. You come out, you sit under a tree. It's typically under a tree. You strip off the first layer of gear, and then you're just sitting there flush faced. So it's really exciting and yes, it would make sense then goalies, similar to wearing bunker gear for firefighters and a pack on your back. So, because I was curious when I was reading some of the studies that you've done and read about with firefighters, that 75% of them experience heat-related illness every year. And that, I mean, we know it, but I'm curious as just what your theory might be on why heat-related illnesses and risks have been kind of overlooked and they haven't been addressed. And do you have any theories on this?
We have a couple. The first is I think we've heard this from a lot of firefighters personally, that there's a bit of a old school mentality sometimes, not necessarily always anymore, but sometimes from above. This is what we've heard, that there's a bit of suck it up and take it mentality. Oh, you're feeling woozy. Oh, you're not feeling great. Suck it up and take it. And I think that mentality is changing, but that is pervasive, is our understanding. You probably have more insight than us on that, but I'm sure you've experienced this where people may feel a pressure that they don't want to show that they're experiencing those symptoms. The other piece that we know is the gear has gotten better in some ways, which has made it more difficult in others. We're all well aware that you're trying to seal out contaminants, you're trying to seal out heat, and all of those things that are making the bunker gear better at doing those jobs are sealing in your body heat better and making it so that those natural mechanisms like sweat that allow you to cool aren't working very well when you come out of the fire. So that combination of working hard under these thermally stressful conditions, and firefighters maybe don't know as well as they should about hydration, electrolytes, and all these things they need to be doing, even just on the way to the fire, to make sure that they're set up well for it. Some of that knowledge and education seems to be a little behind where it needs to be for people to be in the best condition possible to not experience those symptoms. And also, if you're fighting a fire and you're in that gear, I think sometimes it's just, there's almost nothing you can do about it, in the sense of if you're working hard enough for long enough and come out, if you hit that limit, you're just going to get some of those heat-related illness symptoms. And we should be clear, it's heat-related illness symptoms. So that can be a range of things. It's not heat stroke necessarily. It's, people feeling woozy, brain fog, a little faint, nauseous, any of those symptoms that come along with those heat-related stress symptoms.
I would add one more reason why it hasn't maybe necessarily become a focal point of the fire service is that when cooling is hard, and this is something I've learned a lot from Ariel and the physics of cooling. But when you think about your air conditioner or your refrigerator or your freezer, these are all very large devices for a reason. They take a lot of energy. And so there have not been a lot of options available prior to provide better cooling mechanisms. Some professional sports teams will bring in big fans, they'll have misters and things like that. Those are big installations that you can't necessarily transport on a truck easily.
I'll actually add one other interesting thing. I'll throw some science in here that a lot of people don't quite realize is all of your nervous system mechanisms that you have for sensing temperature that you have conscious access to are on your skin surface. You have no conscious access to your internal core body temperature. So we have seen this. I have seen people, so we're at the Firefighter Challenge, if you know what that is, that sort of firefighter combat sport. Seeing people come off red-faced, flushed, starting to sweat, and it was a cool day. And they're like, oh no, I'm totally cool. It's freezing out here. And it's like, you feel freezing, but internally your core body temperature is clearly high. Like I can literally see it in your face, but you can't sense it the way you sense it. So your heart rate is actually a very good correlation with your core body temperature. So your heart beating hard is a good indication that your core body temperature is elevated, but you don't feel hot inside. The only conscious access you get is like oh man, I feel a little faint. I feel a little woozy. Oh, I'm falling over. You know, that's the conscious access you get. You don't actually sense your core temperature. You sense your skin temperature.
That's true. As I was thinking about that, as you're saying it, I'm like, you're right. Like, unless you look in the mirror and you're like, oh my skin is so red. I'm I'm so flushed. It's true. It's true. And then it makes that even harder when you've got bunker gear on. I mean, you're covered from head to toe, and you do, I think also, being in a working fire, the, the oxygen from your tank, the air from your pack gives this kind of cool blast that I think can also, because I feel like our faces are typically where we do sense heat. We can tell when we're like, I'm running hot. I can feel this. And so you get this kind of like these, as you inhale that, it breaks the seal and you bring the air in, and then you get this little cool gush, which I think also might mask that natural knowing of like, my face is hot, So, yeah, just to add to this conversation. But I would love to learn about glabrous tissue. Let's talk about glabrous tissue because Evy and I have talked about this, but old school cooling in the firehouse used to be, what they taught us as EMTs is put ice packs in the armpits and the groin. And so I'd really love to know, like, what is it about glabrous tissue? So the palms, the soles of the feet, the cheeks that makes it so good for cooling technologies.
Yeah. So that original suggestion of, oh, armpits, groin, that's coming from the logic of you've got large arteries there, moving blood, and those arteries do not vasoconstrict very easily. So if you put ice packs there, the theory is the skin is thin, you have large arteries, you should be able to conduct a reasonable amount of heat out of the body there.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting about glabrous skin, and the reason it's in those spots, is you are a mammal. And because you're a mammal, you used to be covered mostly with hair and didn't sweat in most places, right? So if you look at a dog, for instance, they have, just like you, no hair on the palms of their hands, the soles of their feet, and for them on their nose. And if you looked at a chimpanzee, you'd see these areas of the face. And so to thermoregulate, where you don't have hair is a great place to dump heat. And in those places, you have direct connections between arteries and veins known as arteriovenous anastomoses, or AVAs. And these direct connections allow there to be really high blood flow in those areas and make them really incredible portals for dumping heat. So you have about 10 times more blood flow in these skin areas than other skin areas when you're working hard. So that just makes them, what you're really trying to do is cool your blood. So if you can cool those areas, you cool the blood, that cool blood runs through your circulatory system, cools off your muscles, cools off your core body temperature.
Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking about too, like my hands are always the first thing to sweat as soon as I have like a little emotional ping, of like fear or nervousness. And I'm just wondering if that also, is tied into this, in the whole of like, that is your body's, place to to let off the heat. And
yeah, when you're trying to when you face a thermal challenge, the first thing your body does, the very first thing it does is these AVAs, those connections, start to dilate, and that allows more blood flow to your limbs. Then what your body does is, if that's not enough to face the thermal challenge, your skin, all of the skin on your body dilates, the capillaries in your skin. That's why you get flushed. Mm-hmm. So that's your body saying, well, let me flow blood to my cutaneous surface to try to dump more heat from my skin. Mm-hmm. And that's also one of the reasons why heat is so hard. You've got a competition then from the blood flow on your cutaneous surface to the blood flow to your muscles. The blood flow on your cutaneous surface can go from about 300 milliliters a minute to 8 liters a minute when you are at that totally flushed state. Wow. So it's a huge challenge for your body to have this competition between blood flowing to your muscles and blood flowing to your skin. And then obviously as you dilate, and then you cannot face the thermal, you can't beat the thermal challenge yet, you then start to sweat. So that's kind of the stages you go through. But once you're sweating, that's the last line of defense you've got. So if you're not evaporating your sweat well, like you've got bunker gear on, that sweat's not doing anything for you.
Yeah.
So you've maxed out all your cooling abilities after you've vasodilated those arteries and capillaries, and you've started sweating. That's all you've got.
Well, that was what bunker gear was designed for, right? To protect the thermal layer and also cook us from the inside out. So, but I'm curious, how has the response been? I know you mentioned, you know, some of your initial contacts with the fire service. How have they kind of reacted to the Narwhals? I'm just curious.
So far, what we've heard is that the guys love them, would be the verbatim. Excuse me. They, you know, they, like I said, they have them. The largest sort of use case of the device right now is in a fire department that's using them for incident rehab and in training. They have a couple sets in the gym available for folks to use as well when they're just lifting and training. And you know, it's a really important sort of part of their incident rehab, like their overall health and wellness program. So there, you know, obviously there's a lot of different pillars to these programs, but mitigating heat stress is really important. And one thing we haven't touched on is really important because thermal stress leads to cardiac strain. Ariel mentioned it, like when you're hot, your heartbeat starts to increase. The harder your heart is working, the more at risk you are for cardiac events. And the leading cause of line of duty death for firefighters, as everyone I'm sure is well aware of, is cardiac arrest. And so it's really from that perspective, that safety perspective, and just the ability to improve recovery on an ongoing basis, that is important, and that we've heard a lot of positive feedback. We've also heard we have just very little experience so far, but we're starting to get some feedback from wildland firefighters as well, who are not only, you know, facing heat stress as they fight fires, but also doing a great deal of work and carrying a lot of gear and not necessarily having access to recovery and rehab, you know, rehab trucks and things like that. And so having something that's portable, that can last, that they can bring out if somebody is having a heat illness symptoms, and treat that quickly, hopefully bring that back under control, is another really interesting use case.
That's awesome. Now the base of the unit takes cool packs, correct? That you kind of cool in the refrigerator or freezer. How does that? So I'm curious, being portable, but how long would it last once you put the pack in there?
Yeah, so if Evy wants to show off the like cutaway of it, I think we should have that right there.
I have a cutaway, but I don't have a pack.
There might be one in there. No, not around.
It's gone missing.
That's all right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean the cool packs, I think I probably have one. No, not one there. I can go grab one, but the cool packs basically, I mean, they look less like this, just sort of a bottle that you freeze. They will actually, because it's a material that will freeze above the melting point of ice, or the freezing point of ice. We haven't really talked about it yet, but it's probably worth saying at this point. One of the secret sauces to palm cooling is you don't want to vasoconstrict, because you're trying to cool your blood. So you need to be holding something that is cool, not cold, about 55 degrees surface temperature. The material that's in those cool packs, the way that it keeps that cool, not cold temperature is by having a freezing point above the freezing point of ice. And so the material itself will freeze in the freezer or on ice. So you could have an ice chest and just freeze it there. Then you drop it inside, as Evy showed that cutaway, you drop it inside it's a vacuum insulated stainless steel thermos. And then when they're not in use, we have a nice insulating cap for them. And it's a very well insulated system. So if you're in a reasonably temperature controlled environment, let's say you set them up at the beginning of a shift and put them on the truck, they'll last 12 hours, no problem, until you start to use them. They'll give you about 2 hours of intermittent use, actually holding them, people holding
Mm-hmm.
them, between shifts or trading them around.
Mm-hmm.
They'll last for about 2 hours. Continuous holding, it's more like a little under an hour, but almost no one's continuously holding them. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's about 12 hours that they'll last before someone actually is in contact with them.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah, then that would be great for wildland crews who are going out and need something that has as much endurance as they do.